Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world listening to Life After Work, a podcast brought to you by RadioAlty and Altrincham Community Media. This is a podcast where four guys in the prime of their life discuss various topics of the world and of life in general. With me today, we have Mr. Ash Sharma, a former dentist who unfortunately had to retire from work due to an injury to his hand. Good afternoon, Ash.
Good afternoon. Good to you all.
And then we have Mr. Phil Harrison. Mr. Phil Harrison used to work in insurance and is now a retired professional of, shall we say, running and keeping fit and exercise and triathlon. Even saying his name puts me out of breath, ladies and gentlemen, it really does. And finally, we have Mr. Rod Maxwell, resident DJ of RadioAlty, who hosts the Lockdown Late Lunch, Mondays, Wednesdays, Friday between 2 and 4. Please tune in. And to end this fantastic four, myself, Paul Davies, an author currently living in exile on the island of Skiathos in Greece. Good afternoon to you all, gentlemen.
Good afternoon. What about you?
Feeling good myself. We've had a little discussion about what the topic will be about today, and as it's nearing the anniversary of the first lockdown of COVID, I believe that we will be discussing what we've learned over the past year during COVID, what we've seen has changed, what we expect for the future, and just our general thoughts on COVID itself. Now, obviously, to the listener, these are just our opinions. We're not funded by anybody. We're not in line for or against anybody. It's just four chaps chewing the cud. Maybe you'll agree, maybe you'll disagree. Who knows? So,
personally, I'd have to add, I am open to sponsorship at any time. Just want to get that in there.
That was a nice plug. Yeah. So if you want to sponsor Phil in any way, shape, or form, or go to Amazon to buy a book by P.A. Davies, it's all good stuff. So, does anybody want to start us off and tell us their thoughts on what, how they've been over the last year with COVID? What's on their mind about it?
Well, do you know, does it not, in some ways, is it not staggering that it's almost 12 months of this? I mean, it's quite remarkable when you look back and you think, okay, when was it I could go to the pub or could go for a coffee and or do the things that we took for granted that we no longer take for granted? I find that it's quite amazing that 12 months has gone past and people actually have got a little bit not used to it, but it's become the new norm. I think it's quite staggering, really, how that time has flown by in one way.
I'm wondering. I know we've got vaccinations that are being rolled out, blah blah blah, but you think that we're a year on? Have we actually moved any further into it? Have we? Has anything changed? Because from a year ago we put in lockdown. A year on, we're in lockdown, and the same rules are applying, and nothing seems to be moving forwards. We're in like this stagnant, almost stalemate position where we don't know what to do. We haven't got any clear guidance now where we're going in the future. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but
no, it does seem to have worked out like that, strangely enough, albeit that clearly there have been ups and downs and phases within that time. But yes, curiously, a year on, it almost feels like we're back to square one. And yet, I'd say just recently in a more positive way, because or maybe it's exactly the same in that last year we didn't think it would last very long. I think this time around we are more confident. I know there's a lot of uncertainty still, but we are more confident that an end is in sight, however long that takes. This is, if not the beginning of the end, it's the end of the beginning. We're through it. We're through the worst bit, I think. You talked about we wanted to reflect on how it's impacted us. Strangely enough, I don't know, we're all in this slightly same position of our worlds having changed before it anyway. For me, I think it's actually, I wonder whether it's impacted me less because of that overall situation, that the world out there has closed down to meet the way mine had already done in a way. It's closed in. So I didn't have the ambitions to travel, and we talked about engine going out. Those are the things I can't do anymore. But actually, I think I've discovered that a large number of my pursuits are fairly solitary and therefore unaffected. You know, I like to read, listen to music. Obviously, all the training's quite solitary. So I just wonder whether that has really helped me through this, that my pursuits have been largely unaffected.
Well, I think unless you've had a family member who's been ill or sadly died, or you've got a family member who's in the thick of it in the NHS, it in some ways you've got to be thankful that whatever it is, that life has gone on. In some ways, it feels like there's been a group of people been in the thick of it, either because they've been patients or because they've been in the NHS and dealing with it. And then for the rest of us,
do you know, Rod, that's an extremely good point. That is a really good point. I think maybe a lot of it has actually, thankfully, in a way, passed me by.
Well, it has struck me that, as I don't feel in a position to moan or groan about what's happened, because I think, first of all, my family's healthy. We can pay the bills, and yeah, sure, there's a lot of things we can't do, but you know what? They're minor things compared to the basics of your health and still having a roof over your head. So in a way, I know that the clapping for the NHS probably was symbolic, a little bit shallow at times. But what struck me is that at the start, every day you had those briefings, and the numbers were very front of mind. And the NHS was front of mind, and what's annoyed me a little bit is that that's gone into the background, if you like, I'm not saying anybody's forgotten about what the NHS are going through and what they're putting themselves through, but I just feel like, the story is being moved on, and it inevitably will do, but people are still in their dying, people are still taking risks in looking after them, going in every day and wearing PPE and doing that shift. I just feel like it's this normal. We've become normalized to it. Absolutely. Very quickly.
I was just thinking of that exact word and almost institutionalized to it. This has to become our new, hate to use the phrase, our new normal.
Yeah.
The way you can retain after a year that sense of this is a special situation. It has, but maybe that's the way we deal with it, to accept it as, not that we should forever, mind you, but we have to treat it as our normal lives for now, and work within that, work with that.
It is. I mean, what I find more frustrating, though, is looking at the health side of it, is the actual policy side of it. Is all of last year, 2020, there were decisions had been made by the government, and they've always been late to arrive at the scene. Evidence has suggested you should do something, and it's been decided to do 2 or 3 weeks later. It's only then decided to be done. You cast your mind back all the way, before the summer holidays, and it's more pertinent to me because I've got 2 kids, one of which had to GCSEs were abandoned, and they didn't plan for it. They didn't look at it. They stood there. Boris Johnson stood there amazed at, that it came to this. He's standing there thinking, what can we do? This has been, I'm amazed by this. This has suddenly occurred. Why would it? It hasn't suddenly occurred. This was a process which was snowballing to this disaster, and it's affected kids really badly. You had students. I mean, I've got colleagues whose kids were going to go to medical school, and they're going to go to dental school and things like that. And it was really, really stressful. It was horrendous for their mental well-being. And now again, you think, right, okay, we've learned our lessons, something's going to happen. Guess what's going to happen this summer as well? It'll be the same thing again. Nothing has been learnt in, it is like Groundhog Day. We were saying that before. And it's about the government frustratingly not listening to educated professional opinion. second guessing all the time. And this is why we are in a lockdown 1 year from where we were last year. We still can't go on holidays. We can't organize trips. My son's birthday is today. He'll be doing it on his own again. And so it's, it's frustrating. And it's also, it's sad when you see your children having to go through this. This is, as a teenager, they should be out, chatting, talking. They should be having parties, with their peers and going to university, going to college, and that's what things we took for granted. None of that has happened. So for me, the overriding feeling I've got is that of frustration, because a lot of it, not all of it, because, this is new. No government has been able to legislate for something like this, but big chunks of this were so avoidable, I think.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think, okay, let's go. I'm kind of in two camps here. I'm kind of in Phil's camp on one side, because I've been able to, during lockdown, because I've come over to Greece. I was lucky enough to get here before they shut all the airports. So like Phil, lockdown, yes, it has affected me somewhat, but I've still been able to do what I want to do without much hindrance. So long as I wear my mask and follow the rules here, writing's a solitary thing anyway, so I can do my writing inside. So I'm not in a position to say how I would be affected if I was still in the UK. So on that score, I'm with Phil. It has affected me some, but not as much as people over in the UK who are furloughed and et cetera, But I've always said, if I can offer an opinion on what should have been done, when this first came out, the government should have said, do you know what? We've got a killer virus here. Let's lock down immediately everything for a month, 2 months, whatever, until we get a proper handle on it. We know what we're dealing with, and we can advise and direct accordingly to keep people safe and stop them going on. But they come up with plans. We've got a deadly virus, so a week on Monday, we're going to go in lockdown. Oh, right, so Mr. Coronavirus says it's okay, 6 days, I'm not going to infect anybody, because Boris has said a week on Monday, we're going into lockdown. I'll hold back till then. You can't go into restaurants. Well, you can if there's only 20 of you. Coronavirus doesn't follow policy and legislation of the government. It's a killer virus. Yeah. So what they should have done a year ago to stop us being in lockdown, I think, this year, is just say, right, we don't know what it is. We know it's bad. We don't know how to handle it just yet. You're all in lockdown. And it's this in and out of lockdown that I think's peeving people off. I think that, oh God, we're going in lockdown again. What I think is also quite a bit of a spin. I'm all for positivity and light at the end of the tunnel. But like Rod was saying earlier, they seem to put on the back burner how many people are dying and the work the NHS are doing and how many people are affected, and use this hope for the future. It's more about, we've done 15 million people vaccinated today. Yes, it's great. They're getting through the vaccine, and this vaccination, this and this vaccine, it's great. And yes, it's positive. But there's still what they're not getting the message across. Yes, we're getting the vaccine, everyone's getting vaccinated, but the virus is still here and it's still infecting people and it's still causing deaths. They've lost the balance. And I'm all for hope. I'm all for hope. Yes, we've got the vaccine, but they should balance it out and give people the truth and say, look, folks, we're a year on in lockdown because basically we messed up. We hadn't a clue. No government would know. Nobody knew what it was going to do, but we messed up. But 6 months into their messing up, they should have realised they'd messed up and gone, right, we need to be harsh and we need to be strict and we need to get a handle on it.
I mean, totally agreed, Rod. I mean, Paul, you're absolutely right. At that end of the day, I mean, 6 months into it, they didn't get hard. They didn't get tougher. It was the reverse. Do you not remember in the summer?
Yes.
You go out, in the summer, you spend to whatever it was called, wasn't it? You got half your bill was knocked off or something if you went for a meal and a drink or anything. So they were actively encouraging people to go out and have a meal. And then they wonder why the R number started to crawl up after the summer. And then we had you had the duality of things where they were saying, right, when you like Diwali and Eid, that should be stopped. You don't celebrate that and all the rest of it, which is fine. I think we covered that before, but because we then found out that it wasn't the going out that was important; it was with your family. That was really important. But the point I'm making here is that back for Christmas, it was initially, wasn't it 4 days, 5 days? We're going to have a Christmas. Then it came down to 1 day. Yeah. The logic, it defies logic. I mean, why if 5 days are by, why would 1 day be any better? It's just ridiculous. And why wasn't that stopped? It's just like, as you say, Paul, it's just the decisions were illogical, and they didn't have any kind of evidence behind them. And this is why we're here. This is what, if you look at other governments, such as in Australia, New Zealand, which did it, like as you say, really hard, toughened up. They're having concerts outside. They're having cricket. If you look on the TV, there's cricket matches with an audience, with spectators.
With respect,
that's the difference. That's the difference.
And with respect, just to, you couldn't help but mention cricket, could you?
Yes, we should have agreed that was off limits today. That was last week's topic of conversation.
You know how hard it was, Phil, to get cricket into. I'm glad Paul noticed that.
But just, I mean, if you think back to where you were a year ago. And of course, we didn't know any of this. We weren't doing this particular activity, but we didn't know anything about COVID, lockdown, nothing else. It's quite amazing just how much things have flipped in a year. And I mean, from a personal point of view, what do you think it has told you about yourself or about the world around you, or
Just before we go on to that, can I put a question out to you guys? Do you think that this situation that I'm not in, but the people in the UK are in, do you think they've started to realise what they took for granted pre-lockdown, pre-COVID, or do you still think the minds are just full of moaning that they can't do a particular thing? Do you know what I mean? Like people will go out for regular meals, which they took for granted, and they can't do that. Are they more peeved that they can't go out, or do they sit back and go, do you know what, we've lost that because of COVID? I don't know. I can't get a feel in the UK of how people are reacting. If they're actually genuinely thinking, you know what, we took most of our life for granted, and this is how it is. Or
probably a bit of both.
Yeah, I was going to say both. Both are evidence that a lot of moaning and that moaning about what we've lost.
I think the two are related, aren't they, a bit?
Yeah, they equally. I think with that goes that you're moaning about it because you did take it for granted. Now you don't.
My worry is that we won't learn any lesson from this. My worry is that we'll put it behind us too quickly, and not actually and not take lessons from it, not take the experience of it and do something better. I think I've said before, Rod, that I think I share that view. I think we will quickly revert in a way. I'm going to modify that slightly. I think we will. There is a lot of hope in my mind at the moment, and I think we will return to something more normal. However, I think long term, we're going to be living with this. It's not going to go away entirely, just like flu hasn't. I don't want to make too many parallels with flu, but just in a way that hasn't, and we live with that at a minor level. From what I'm reading and at the moment, it seems to be that's likely what we're going to be dealing with. So the fact that it won't go away entirely, I think we'll keep certain modifications we'll have to make to our lives, even if it's getting a booster jab once a year. Things like that, I think we'll keep it at the forefront of our minds. Yeah. Hopefully so. I think I've said this before, but we need a bit of a roadmap out of this, and I don't mean from a medical point of view. I mean from a societal point of view and an economic point of view. You know, because we're doing this and we're doing Brexit and goodness knows whatever else, and we've got a bunch of kids who are currently missing at least a year's worth of education, and you know we've got to find a way of helping them get through that, and
that'll be the interesting phase, because at the moment we've reflected a lot on the leadership decisions, but I think it's been a fairly one-track decision. It's been balanced between opening up the economy and exposing us to the spread of the virus. That's been the spectrum on which we've been working. Yeah. I think all those wider political decisions and the economic pathway you're talking about, all that's yet to come. The decisions about how we're going to pay for the support that's been given through lockdown.
Well, if you look at it, Phil, I mean, if you look, you know, you mentioned just there, Rod, you got about the societal impact of this. If you look at history as your guide, I mean, I was chatting, I've got a neighbour 2 doors down, and he's quite an elderly chap, so he remembers what happened during the war. So he's looking at the goodwill that you had during the war in terms of people rallying round. They had it much worse. You know, there was no furlough checks or anything like that. Things were rationed. You couldn't have sugar, you couldn't have chocolate, you couldn't have biscuits, you couldn't have anything like that. And meat was rationed. You know, if you wanted to grow something, you had to get the allotment. And that's where that came from. So all of that, he was saying all that goodwill that was engendered lasted about a year or two. That was it. And then suddenly, when you had to compete for jobs again, when your shop was open and you had to start getting back to the realities of commerce, reality of life, then so all of a sudden you're back into it again, to the competitive world, and it was soon forgotten. So, we've all been saying it's been great that we've had this. We've actually looked within ourselves and we found a lot of great things about ourselves. We have done that, but from what history has said, it tends not to last a great deal of time. It quickly evaporates, and we move on, and life goes on. And we don't even know what's going to happen with the future. Remember, we're saying that, once the shops are open, once kids are back in school, they realize how much they don't know, how far behind they are, how much shops are, how many shops have gone under. We don't actually know yet. Dentistry itself, will it ever get back? My own personal viewpoint on it is that it won't be now. It's going to be really hard to get an NHS dentistry, which is as it was before. Health as well has suffered more as well. And you're looking at how are we going to pay for it? There's a whole show in that, isn't there?
I've got to something you said earlier. I'm going to throw this in. Do you know what? This is a bit controversial, but there you go. I'm going to throw it in. I don't care. On about community and that guy who lives a couple of doors away, so for a year. I've always said, people are harping on about this. We've got a good community, and yes, people have built up decent communities. But here's the thing about community: if there's 6 people in your community and a dozen eggs, you get on fine. It's great. If you've got 6 eggs and a dozen people, let's see where the community spirit goes, because it's dog eat dog.
Yeah,
now,
absolutely.
While times are good and we've got plentiful, or more or less plentiful of everything, yeah, people will help out. If this went on any longer and suddenly there's a shortage of water, there's a shortage of fuel for your fire, there's a shortage of this, shortage of that. Let's see how the community goes on then, this community spirit, or will it be a case of dog eat dog, like I say? It's very, I'm with that guy who lives next door to you. Somebody else has told me that about the war. They sing about virulent things about getting together and everyone pulling together. Oh, during the war. Yeah. And somebody exactly who was in the war said, yeah, war was great because they didn't think it would go on longer than a year. So everyone rallied round. After a year, 18 months, when it was still going on, but rations and everything were going down and the food, it was like, I love you very much, neighbour, when everything's good, but you're not having me turnips. That sort of thing. That's how it got. And I'm wondering, I don't know how it will go. It like somebody said when we were off air before, I agree 100%. We're in the eye of this storm. I don't think
totally.
We're in the eye of it.
I think we are, and the bit that worries me is that if you take things that happened after the Second World War, there were some building blocks for how our society is. The NHS, for example, was one of the building blocks that came out of the Second World War, And I believe that actually that's what should happen next. We should have some building blocks for how we want the society and the country to work, not just in a post-Brexit period, but a post-COVID period. And you would hope that, for example, anybody who wants to educate themselves, get a university education or whatever in health would be seen to be a prominent pathway, and therefore, but it may not be that way. And this is where my biggest concern is that I've seen such a lack of leadership in this country, politically and for a number of different areas. I don't have any hope that there's the people who can actually guide us through take us out of this and into a positive with a positive plan, basically. And that for me has been the biggest. I think I've said it before. It's been the biggest single thing that I've noticed is just how weak we are in a leadership way within our politicians in Parliament, at least. And I don't actually have a lot of optimism for them guiding us out of this, really. And in fact, I think I'll go so far. I think I've said this before. I'm actually starting to worry that actually democracy is failing, because we've ended up with, I think, a very poor crop of people who are supposed to be our leadership and guiding us out of this. So I think we are still in a bit of the eye of the storm, maybe possibly turning a corner with some of the things that happened. I worry that we don't have the credible leadership that actually can guide the country and turn things around. And regardless of COVID, of just a Brexit point of view, that was needed. We needed a whole industrial economic plan for Brexit, for goodness sake. And we didn't have many countries falling over themselves to trade with us and work with us. And now that's doubly hard because of what we've been through. So yeah, I am apathetic. I've become I'm very frustrated. Actually, I think I've said this on a previous call or previous one of these. I'm very frustrated because I have there's nothing I can see that I can actually do that will help. I think it's appalling. I really, I would almost stand as an MP, to be honest with you, because I sort of think I'm so frustrated. I need to do something about it. But my memory doesn't allow that to happen. Although I think I've said before that might be a good thing in Parliament. But yeah, I am. I'm really, really frustrated, and I think some of the teenagers and young professionals out there were not confident of our political leaders anyway. This has not helped.
I think you're right. I think there's two major issues going on. There was Brexit, and of course there was COVID. I think the sensible solution when COVID broke out and we're going through what we're going through, and I'm sure the rest of Europe would agree, if they just said, can we postpone Brexit for a year, bring it back on the table in a year? Because at the minute, we don't know what we're dealing with. And, you've got two very important issues that are only getting 50% each of the input and the fact that they should be looked at individually with 100% commitment to it. And you can't do it when you've got two major things. So for some, they should have just said, Brexit, let's put it on hold. Let's get a handle on COVID. Let's cure COVID and then talk about Brexit.
It was political ego, wasn't it? Political ego, basically. That's what stopped that from happening.
And it must be making it fiendishly difficult to extract the input either, given that they're all getting mixed in. Whatever position we come out of this in, will it be easy to say that's down to Brexit, that's down to COVID?
Maybe that's the perfect thing, is that it allow them to deflect attention from one to the other. But yeah, I've said before, I think if the country was a company, you wouldn't, you would have put something on hold because you've got a strategic imperative, priority. But
I mean, Rod, we're going on about the lack of leadership. I mean, I totally agree. I mean, my overriding theme is frustration as well, for the reasons I've mentioned of all the bodges that have happened. But just as much as there was lack of leadership, you look at where other organizations, other people have come to the fore and stepped up. You have to look at the vaccination program. That's just people absolutely working their crannies off to get this done. You look at the NHS, that's people working above and beyond what they get paid for, overtime and everything. That's why that's work. If you look at education, headmasters, headmistresses, teachers doing what they've done, you look at people whose businesses are on their knees virtually. They pivoted. They've had to do different things. Pubs are doing takeaway drinks and meals and that sort of thing. It's not through any leadership that this has happened. It's not through any help. Furlough is useful. It's more than useful. It was a godsend, it was. But in terms of the lack of leadership, the only reason we've got through this is because of other organizations and other people stepping up and working twice as hard, 3 times as hard. They got away with one, haven't they? Really, I think, totally got away with one.
Well, possibly, but I think it has been noted, that lack of leadership. I think you referenced it before, the flip-flopping, the stop-start approach to this. Dealing through this, we've been had a much more steady hand on the tiller, less severe change of tack each phase we've been through situation, but we wouldn't have been through the open up, have it spread rapidly. I'm sure we wouldn't have had as many deaths.
We just need to look at the examples that Australia and New Zealand have set, for example, and the other Asian countries. They've just had a strong leadership, which has been harsh, which has been hard. It was needed and it was done. Because if people explain to you what's needed, a harsh solution to it, you'll accept it if you can see where it's leading to. What you don't want is someone who wants to be Mr. Popular, who tries to get all the, who tries to be, who doesn't want to make the hard decision. And we've only got away with this, I think, and I still think we have got away with it now to an extent. It's only because of other organizations like the NHS, the people I've mentioned, or no, there's loads of other people who have done this. It's society that's absolutely, stepped up to get us out of this, really. It's not our government.
No, I mean, Rod had a lady on one of his shows talking about lockdown, and she lived in Australia. And forgive me if I'm wrong on the figures here, but let's say there's a state, and within that state there's 10 regions, and Australian states can be thousands of miles wide. So it was a state and the region. She was saying that within one particular region of that state, let's say 3 people got COVID, that state wasn't closed, that region wasn't closed down, the whole state was locked down. And that's how they dealt with it. And it's like,
yeah,
what an ideal thing. If somebody, it's not spreading border across border, lock everything down.
It surprised me actually how, because I think Australia has had a total of about 1,000 COVID related deaths. So 1/100th of what we've had, which is just a figure that staggers me given the size of the country. But there's something about their society where they complied, and there was a top-down decision. I actually thought Australians would have been a little bit less compliant, but they've done that. And okay, it's a big country, but you still have big metropolitan areas that they'll have vast populations. So there's something in that for me. Well, just going forward for the future, what's your hopes, expectations for the next year? Where do you think we'll be this time next year?
I'm just hoping what I don't want to happen. A quick example. When I was in the cops, people normally do 30 years in the cops, and as those 30 years cops retire and move on, there's another wave of new cops coming in, blah blah blah. Now, when they stopped recruiting for the cops, what happened was you had all the 30-year service cops retiring, but there was nothing coming through. So there was a massive gap of cops, and very few cops left because they weren't recruiting. What I'm scared or a little bit anxious about with COVID, if it goes on, let's say, for another year, is all those university students where, for example, in Ash's profession, dentistry, the dentists are all moving up, but they're relying on these new dentists coming through to fill up the spaces and train. Now they've been stopped coming through. So dentistry and other professional areas, will you have now a massive, will there be not enough dentists or doctors or nurses, because those apprentices that should have been in there now, you know, the university grads that should have been taking up those positions now, would have to wait another 2 years? I don't know. I hope it does.
An element of fast tracking maybe to catch up. I don't know. Where I think we'll be, I mean, gosh, I've got visions of playing this in a year's time and it being horribly different to what I'm going to be described. It's a mug's game getting the crystal ball out, isn't it? But what I hope for or expect is that slightly different but more normal environment where we're living with a very low level of the virus, but largely our lives look the same. My hopes are that we've retained some of the things we've learned. People are traveling for work less. We've taken advantage of those technology elements we were talking about a week or two ago, to all the advantages of remote working and the benefits those can bring. And hopefully we've retained some of that sense of community, recognising the value of our public services, not forgetting what the NHS did for this, and all emergency workers, teachers, lots of categories there that we haven't forgotten them, and they do retain a higher sense of value in our community and in our society. So then just a few of the things, I hope that's what it looks and feels more like.
Yeah, that I think is how it should go. That's how I think it should go. And like you say, I just don't, you know, I don't want to be negative and think that there's no doctors, dentists coming through, but I do hope that we will learn lessons. It'll be forever in our minds what's happened during COVID, but we'll get back to some normality. I truly hope we do that. Just very quickly before I let the other guys tell their hope, somebody put on Facebook, I hope that they're going to give NHS workers, doctors and teachers a pay rise after COVID. And I replied to that, I said, they should be given that regardless of COVID, because the NHS staff I know how hard they work, and they do need the pay rise, and they do need properly compensating for the work they do. Teachers, emergency services, authors in Skiathos.
Especially authors.
Especially
emergency authors.
Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, I'm with you on that, Phil. I hope we have that little bit of normality to go back to.
I mean, on a personal level, I mean, was it 2019, late October, that's when I stopped working. And my idea was to use 2020 to actually explore, you know, because I've not had a chance to actually look at what I want to do, how I want to do it, and that sort of thing. So on a very personal level, it'd be nice for me to actually be able to do that now. I've had some ideas that I wanted to do. I'll be able to go out, maybe go to people, go to some series of courses that I've always wanted to do, and I've not been able to do that. So I feel cheated out of that, because by now I wanted to be able to well entrenched into something new. So on a personal level, that's what I would love to happen. Yeah. That'd be great. But on a bigger scale, I think, yeah, I mean, the future is going to be, I hope, where we do, as you say, appreciate what we've taken for granted before, such as people who look after us, you know, the people who we think of as mundane. So you look at in nursing homes, these people, you know, no one gave them another thought really until you couldn't go and visit your parents and that sort of thing. NHS nurses, doctors, as you said, teachers, bus drivers, people who worked in shops, kept things going. And I just got a horrible feeling, we've alluded to it already, is that I think, you know, give it 4, 5, 6 months, once life goes back on its rails again and the train keeps moving, we're going to forget all this. It'll just be forgotten.
I'll pick up on one thing you said earlier when I gave a very selfish answer to an earlier perspective and you highlighted the impact was majorly on our children. So I think to add to my hopes from their perspective, I hope I see them, just like you, getting back on track, their lives being able to move forward more quickly. As we said, it hasn't had that much of an impact on me, like you said, Paul, too. But it has on them. You have a very good point earlier, so that's what I'd love to see, is lives not being put on hold any longer.
I heard a stat this week, and it shouldn't have surprised me, but it did surprise me, and it was a shocking stat, which is, I think there's Premiership players in and around Manchester, like many clubs, that are on somewhere around £300,000 a week. Now, even a month would be a lot of money.
Even a year.
A year would be a lot.
Well, exactly that. It would be a huge amount of money, and for me, it's just one example of how out of kilter life has become. That we think it acceptable for somebody who kicks a ball to be, it's okay for them to get £300,000 a week. When somebody who can save lives would get maybe a tenth of that a year,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and these guys are continuing to get this amount of money, and that, and don't get me wrong, I like football, but something has got so fundamentally out of kilter that anybody can accept the fact that they get that amount of money a week, and I don't know where the hell it's gone wrong, but it is gone.
Rod, I don't know if Rod, I think maybe it's a chat for another show, but I think it stems from the fact it's just entertainments are much more important than these essential industries such as health. People, you're going to get film stars, you're going to get Tom Cruise going to get paid $25 million and that sort of thing for doing 8 months of work and that sort of thing. And you're going to get footballers, cricketers less so, baseball players and that sort of thing. But you're going to get them, But that's the imbalance we've got. That's not COVID. I think
it's not COVID.
That had been developing for 20 years prior to
it. That's the way it is. I agree with you. We've got to, when you did bemoan the fact, saying, "Oh, do you know what? I wish we could just have another footballer, or we could watch football while someone." Was dying potentially in an intensive care unit. You weren't waiting for Pep Guardiola to turn up, were you? You're waiting for your doctor to say, "Oh my God, what's going to happen?"
But what strikes me is the stadiums have been empty for a year, right? And that hasn't actually dented the economics of that sport. No. And it just, for me, and it probably is a discussion for another time, but as a thought for the future, something's got to change, because that is just ridiculous. At the end of the day, it's entertainment,
Well, I know, but in your hand of hearts, do you think it will? Pop stars, musicians?
No, the footballers, you can blame Trevor Francis for that. He's the first £1 million.
First £1 million.
Get him on the show. They were on 30 bob a week until he got his £1 million.
He was the first £1 million player. When was that? 85?
Oh God, yeah. Nottingham Forest to City or something, wasn't it? Yeah.
Before that, I think, just early 80s, maybe.
I think it was 81. I'm sure it was 81. But yeah, £1 million, and from there it's gone up to from 30 bob a week to 300 grand a week. Ridiculous.
It's for kicking a football,
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, well, we'll leave it at that. So we'll be back in a week's time, guys. Right.
And it'll go just like that, won't it?
It will go just like that.
Right. Well, it's lovely to see you once again.
Good to see you all.
Yeah. Take care.
Until next week. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye now.
All right.